Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. In our last episode from the book The Queen Mother, we saw how crazy things got after King Edward VIII stepped down from the throne. The Duke and the Duchess of York had to step up into the king and queen position. After the king left, he wanted to be able to move back to his home in Fort Belvedere, and he was pushing for a title for his soon-to-be wife, Wallis Simpson. The government didn't want him to return to the country for at least 5 to 10 years. They didn't trust what he might do. The nation was divided, and the new king and queen weren't sure the public would accept them in their new roles. They had to prepare for their coronation, and it was a wild time. Let's see what happens today. The court's new reign was held on May the 5th, and all of Britain was preparing for a greater celebration than the 1935 Jubilee. There were official street decorations in every town shop, and owners put up their touches on decorations too. There were portraits of the king and queen. There were red, white, and blue bunting that was hung up, and huge crowds went towards London in special trains and early forms of buses. May queens were chosen, fireworks were purchased, commemorative trees were planted, maypoles were erected on the village greens, and the children were taught to dance around them, holding red, white, and blue ribbons. Bands practiced, people of all ages trained for sports events, and marquees were erected, bonfires built. Veterans of the Great War polished their shoes and prepared to act as stewards throughout the country. May the 9th, congregations gathered in the churches all over the country for special services. Prayers were offered for the king and queen. In the meantime, the Archbishop of Canterbury came to Buckingham Palace for a final talk and prayers with the king and queen. Both the king and queen thought the coronation was an act of great spiritual significance, and they were each devout Christians of simple faith. They both believed in the monarchy, and they both believed that they were offering themselves before God and were being consecrated in the service of their people. Crowds gathered all night, and many people slept on camp beds in the streets. The king and the queen were awoken at 3 a.m. by the testing of the loudspeakers on Constitution Hill. The king wrote in his diary that one of the speakers might have been in our room. From then on, marching troops, bands, and tensions made sleep impossible. The king couldn't eat breakfast and had a sinking feeling inside. Those invited to the coronation had to be there at 7 a.m. Crowds cheered them along the roads, and a special underground train took several hundred peers and peeresses to their full robes and wearing of the coronets, together with the members of the House of Commons from Kensington High Street to Westminster. The fare was 3d. The queen had her own box in the abbey, and she filled the box with the bowels of Leon family and a few friends. Next, all the processions began. The king and queen drove to the abbey in a golden state coach, first used by George III in 1762. The queen was to lead as two processions formed up, and she got delayed when a chaplain passed out. Then the king came in. The queen stood or knelt at her chair immediately in front of the royal box. The king was crowned and took solemn oaths. Then the archbishop made his way towards the queen. She knelt while he prayed. 4 duchesses held over her head the same canopy as was used for the anointing of the king. The queen was anointed on her head only. The king had been anointed on the palms of both hands, on the breast, and on the crown of his head. The archbishop placed the queen's ring, rubies, and brilliants previously worn by Queen Adelaide, Queen Alexandra, and Queen Mary on her 4th finger of her right hand. She was then crowned queen. The archbishop then gave the queen her gold scepter and ivory rod, both made for Queen Mary of Modena, wife of James II. She then went to her throne. Together the king and queen then removed their crowns and received Holy Communion. They walked together down the nave of the abbey, outside to the gold coach. The rain poured down, but the crowds remained excited, and they were cheered with wild enthusiasm. That evening the king had to make his dreaded live broadcast. He rehearsed numerous times with the queen, with Logue, and with Wood. He had stumbled then, but on the actual day, adrenaline overcame nerves and exhaustion, and he was word perfect. Before midnight, Queen Mary wrote to them, "I cannot let this day pass without once again telling you both how beautifully and reverently you carried out this most beautiful, impressive service. I felt so proud of you both, and I felt beloved Papa's spirit was near us in blessing you on this wonderful day. I could not help feeling what that poor foolish David has relinquished for nothing, but it is better and better for our beloved country. And the king and queen then made customary post-coronation visits to the four quarters of the United Kingdom, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England. The country they visited was changing fast. Britain had been let out of the worst of the Depression by a housing boom and growth in consumer industries. There were 1 million telephones in the country in 1922, and by 1938 there were 3 million. Shops were full of electrical goods. Motor cars in the 1920s that only the rich could get were now becoming cheaper and more popular. There were still those who were unemployed, over 1,600,000 people. Conditions were harsh in some mining and industrial areas. More than half of the workforce was without jobs. The king and queen found the tours tiring but rewarding. People saw that the king was fit to do the job. The king and queen came to realize that they could do the job, and they found joy in it. Lord Harewood, the king's brother-in-law, said to the king, "You're getting through a lot of work, and I've never seen you looking better or seeming happier." To which the king replied, "I'm working hard, and I'm liking my job." So the two princesses accompanied their parents on part of the Scottish tour, and the queen went shopping in the rain in George Street and had enthusiastic crowds that broke through the police and went toward her car. The queen wrote that they had 2 very strenuous and inspiring days in Wales, and she said the people were inspiring when one thinks of the terrible times they've been through and still are. In the mining valleys of South Wales, hope is in the air, and I saw more coal-black faces and saw more smoking chimneys than when I was there a few years ago, which pleased us very much. They got a warm welcome in Northern Ireland, despite threats of IRA violence. The crowds were large and bubbling with enthusiasm, and the trip was considered a great success. After their main tours were over, the king and queen went for a holiday at Balmoral. It was their first visit since their coronation, and they were able to relax with their daughters. They kept having guests, so the castle seemed at times like a hotel more than a home. The king and the queen liked the outdoor life more than anything. There was stalking for the men, gentle walks for the women, picnics by waterfalls for adults and children. There were friendly games of cricket on the lawn. Days were warm, but it was a bit frosty at night. Things weren't all light-hearted all the time, though. The Duke of Windsor was still being a problem. His predicament was unprecedented and complicated. He was almost alone in Austria, and he was getting distressed waiting for Wallis Simpson to become a free woman. January 1937, he wrote the king a long letter. He said he wanted to help and support him, and the Duke of Windsor begged for the king to stop the attacks upon him and Wallis from the government and court officials. The Duke kept writing him letters and kept calling him constantly. He would give advice, tell his problems and his demands. The king started to become upset with the calls and started to refuse to take them. The Duke was horrified to have his access cut off. Money was a source of argument, especially when the Duke told lies about his financial situation, and it came out. In early 1937, opposition to a pension for him grew in the House of Commons, and the king wrote him to say he must now tell him the truth. "I understand from you that when I signed the paper at the fort, you were going to be very badly off." Agreement wasn't reached until 1938. In the meantime, there was a lot of bitterness. Even more important than the money was the marriage of the Duke and his future wife and her title. The Duke and his wife felt that some members of the family should attend the wedding in order to give it a royal seal of approval. The Duke felt he had betrayed the woman he loved. Instead of the throne, she was in a villa in the south of France. Their marriage must make amends. It must be as grand as possible. Simpson decided to wait until the coronation was over, then get married. That way the world's attention could turn from that event to them. The couple were set upon having a Church of England service. Mrs. Simpson thought that the king should be able to get a bishop to conduct the ceremony. But the church didn't agree with divorce, and she had been divorced 2 times before. They had found a parish priest from Yorkshire who volunteered his service. Lord Wigman, who was the king's private secretary, said that any member of the family who attended the wedding would be putting a firm nail in the coffin of the monarchy. The king, the queen, and Queen Mary agreed absolutely. Aside from their personal feelings, they were concerned about the public opinion. Queen Mary said to the king, "I suppose you get endless letters as I do, imploring us not to go to the wedding, as it would do great harm, especially after the terrible shaking the monarchy received last December." The king said that no member of the family would attend the ceremony, and none of his chaplains would undertake it. The king wrote to his brother with great difficulty, telling him the bad news and adding, "I can't treat this as just a private family matter, however much I want to." So this made the Duke even more resentful. Another big problem was the Duchess's title. The royal family decided early on that she must not be granted the title of Her Royal Highness, HRH. The Duke felt that the title was essential. Mrs. Simpson considered the title HRH was the only thing to bring me back in the eyes of the world. Queen Mary was horrified. She wrote to the king in early February, "It's unfortunate that he does not understand our point of view with regard to the HRH, and that this rankles still. But there is no doubt you must stick to this decision, as it would make great difficulties for us to acknowledge her as being in the same category with Alice and Marina." The family didn't think the marriage would last, and if the Duke married again, then the next wife would have to be an HRH too, and so would any of his children. So this would mean that instead of confining the royal circle to those in the lineal succession, all sorts of outsiders might be admitted, and this would lower the dignity of the crown. The king was commenting that, "Is she a fit and proper person to become a royal highness after what she's done to the country? And would the country understand it if she became one automatically on marriage?" He thought not, and his family agreed with him. They thought that the monarchy had been degraded quite enough already. Then the Duke of Windsor and his fiancée chose June 3rd as the day for their wedding, and this was King George V's birthday. Queen Mary told the Queen that the choice of the date hurt her very deeply. Of course she did it, but how can he be so weak, I suppose? It is out of revenge that none of the family is going to the wedding. The British papers were writing about the wedding all the time, and Queen Mary found it all sickening. Queen Mary was still mad that they chose the birthday of George V as their wedding day, and said, "I feel so enraged when I think June 3rd that I can hardly speak." And Queen Mary couldn't bear to spend the emotional day doing nothing, and she drove down to Sussex to see Lady Loder's garden at Leonard's Lee, where she found quiet and some peace. She took comfort in the fact that the family was of one mind over it all. The king and queen were worried about the Duke and the Duchess of Windsor. They thought they might soon try to return to Britain. The entire family was against it. They felt it would cause controversy around the monarchy, and worse, it might lead to demonstrations, perhaps some in the favor of the Duke and some against the Duchess. Either way, the prospect didn't please. The queen agreed with her husband that they couldn't come back. You can't have two kings, and she knew that the king had to take hold. Queen Mary felt bad for her son, the king, and she wrote the queen, "Poor Bertie, I fear D still gives him and all of us great trouble. He is terribly selfish and only thinks of his and her point of view and of their position in life. Not a bit of this country, and all of us, of course, know she is at the back of it." Another thing that popped up at this time was when the Duke went to Germany and met Hitler. The German trip was to be followed by a similar tour in the United States. The Duke said his reason was to study housing and working conditions, but tensions with Germany were already high over Hitler's expansionist ambitions. The king told Queen Mary that he never sent a word to me about his plans. And when the Duke and Duchess arrived in Germany, they were escorted everywhere by Nazi officials, and they called the Duchess Her Royal Highness. The trip wasn't a crime, but it was ill-advised. It convinced the Nazis that he was sympathetic to their cause. There was widespread criticism in the U.S. about his apparent endorsement of the National Socialism, and the Duke lost his nerve and canceled his visit to the United States. I will end the video here. It sounds like the King and Queen had the approval of the public, who were really excited about the coronation. Once the King and Queen began their duties, they found they enjoyed their jobs, and they didn't have to worry after a while that they might be doing things wrong. The only concern seemed to be the Duke of Windsor. He wasn't happy being cast out of the country, and he kept bugging his brother to the point when the king started not to take his calls. That made the Duke upset. The Duke and Duchess wanted to wait to have their wedding after the coronation so all eyes would be on them. They didn't get what they wanted about having a bishop do the ceremony, and they didn't get the title for the Duchess as Her Royal Highness. The family felt sure that the marriage was never going to last. They didn't want another wife who might have kids to have all those HRHs floating around. It was nice to see how the country accepted the new king and queen, and they were concerned that the Duke and Duchess also might come back to Britain and that he may have supporters trying to get him back on the throne. They didn't have to worry. The government and public were very happy to have King George VI and Queen Elizabeth on the throne. They were doing a great job and eased the anxiety everyone felt when King Edward VIII stepped down. I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would help out the channel. I wish everyone a good day. Tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.